The earth trembled as the sky turned red. A massive fleet of alien ships descended upon the planet, cloaked by technology that made them nearly invisible to humanity's radar systems. The Xoreth Empire, known throughout the galaxy for their ruthlessness and advanced weaponry, had come to Earth with one goal: annihilate the human race. They were prepared for an easy victory, but they didn't expect what they were about to witness. In a small command center in the heart of what was once a bustling city, Captain Bonner crouched behind a destroyed wall. The countdown on the wall was flashing red, ticking down the seconds until Earth's last defense system would launch its counterattack. His heart pounded in his chest. There was no time to waste. He had to get to the control panel before it was too late. As alien drones hovered in the sky, firing deadly blasts, Bonner darted from cover to cover. The streets were littered with burning debris, and the sound of explosions rang out in every direction. Yet, despite the chaos, Bonner wasn't afraid. Death was something he had learned to live with. It was a constant presence, one that had shaped him and every human soldier fighting today. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but they would not back down. His team fought to the last breath because they knew there was something that Xoreth didn't understand about humans. They had no fear of death. As Bonner made his way into the heart of the ruined city, the ground beneath him shook violently. The alien ships above unleashed an orbital bombardment, raining fire down on everything below. Humans were dying by the thousands, yet they continued to fight, refusing to let fear paralyze them. Bonner reached the control panel just in time, pressing the red button to activate Earth's final line of defense. The world held its breath as the countdown continued, with seconds slipping away. Would humanity survive, or was this the end? The alien invasion had begun in full force, and the Xoreth Empire showed no mercy. Their ships descended in silence, cloaked by technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The moment they uncloaked, the earth trembled. Cities fell in seconds as orbital bombardments shattered everything in their path. The Xoreth had invaded countless planets, and they expected Earth to be no different, another easy conquest. But something caught them off guard. Humans fought back, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. The Xoreth expected to see panic, to hear screams of terror, but instead they witnessed a strange kind of defiance. Humans didn't run. They didn't hide. They picked up arms, set up barricades, and continued to fight. From the Xoreth's perspective, this was madness. They unleashed their deadliest weapons, expecting to break the human will. But instead, humans stood their ground. There were no tear-filled pleas for mercy, no desperate cries. In the face of overwhelming odds, the humans fought with an unyielding resolve that confused and frightened the invaders. The Xoreth tried to understand, tried to make sense of what they were witnessing. They had never encountered a species like this before. The idea that humans would fight without fear of death was incomprehensible. As the days passed, the alien onslaught continued. But humanity didn't break. A group of resistance fighters led by Captain Bonner was stationed in a former military base on the outskirts of a destroyed city. They had no advanced weapons, no powerful armies at their disposal, only their determination to survive. The Xoreth had sent their most powerful drones to finish them off. But these humans, these so-called weak humans, outsmarted them at every turn. They used stealth and strategy to disable the alien technology. They hacked into enemy drones, turning their own weapons against them. The humans had no fear. They didn't fear the drones, the bombs, or even the prospect of dying. In fact, death was something they had come to accept long ago. To the Xoreth, it was unthinkable that a species could face their doom with such indifference. Yet here they were, watching as humans fought not for survival, but for something more: dignity, hope, and freedom. Captain Bonner, ever the symbol of resistance, led his team in a daring mission to infiltrate the heart of the Xoreth's invasion force. Using cloaking devices, the humans snuck through the enemy lines, evading detection. The fight was brutal. The Xoreth's drones were relentless, and the soldiers were few. But Bonner's team never hesitated, even when it seemed like the end was near. They stood tall and faced their deaths head-on. The aliens, though technologically superior, began to question their strategy. Their AI systems, designed to predict and calculate every move of the enemy, were failing them. The humans were unpredictable, fearless, and relentlessly stubborn. The Xoreth's commanders realized that they were facing something far more dangerous than mere resistance. They were facing a species that refused to be ruled by fear. Meanwhile, Bonner's squad continued to push forward, their every move fueled by the belief that death was simply another part of life. In a flashback, Bonner recalled growing up in a world where death was all too familiar. Wars had torn apart cities, and yet humanity had always found a way to rebuild, to come back stronger. It was this history that had shaped him, that had shaped every human who now fought in this war. Humans had learned to live with death, to accept it, and in doing so, they had made themselves stronger. The alien commanders had never encountered such a species, one that found strength in their own mortality. To them, it was a terrifying revelation. Fear was a weapon. It controlled every race they had conquered. But here, on Earth, fear didn't exist in the way they had come to understand it. Instead, the humans had turned fear into their greatest strength. The final battle was nothing short of epic. Bonner and his team infiltrated the Xoreth mothership, using every ounce of their remaining strength to sabotage the alien command center. The Xoreth threw everything they had at them: laser blasts, drones, and even the planet-destroying weapons that had been used against Earth. But the humans fought back with everything they had, refusing to let fear control them. The visual of the close-quarters combat, as humans stormed the mothership's core, was both intense and awe-inspiring. Bonner, in a heroic act of sacrifice, triggered the final bomb that destroyed the alien ship. It was a move that would cost him his life, but he did it without hesitation. His team followed suit, taking down the remaining alien forces. As the Xoreth fled the planet, they realized that they had met their match. They had underestimated the human spirit, and now it was too late. In the aftermath, humanity stood victorious. The Xoreth Empire had been forced to retreat, their forces shattered and broken. Captain Bonner's death was mourned, but his legacy lived on in every human who had fought for Earth's freedom. The message was clear. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their fearlessness in the face of death. Earth had won, not because they had the most advanced weapons, but because they refused to give up, to bow to fear. As humans began to rebuild, the message spread across the galaxy. Earth was no longer a helpless target. It was a force to be reckoned with, a species that would never surrender. And the Xoreth, having tasted the wrath of a race that feared nothing, knew they would never return. The universe had learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate a species that has no fear of death. The sky above Earth was clear one moment, and the next, it was filled with a sight no human had ever witnessed before. Thousands of ships, each larger than any city on Earth, appeared as if from nowhere. The Xoreth Empire had arrived. Their ships were cloaked in technology so advanced that no human radar could detect them until they were already overhead. The moment the cloaking failed, the world saw them: massive, sleek ships, dark and menacing, filling the sky in every direction. People stared in awe and terror, unsure whether this was a dream or a nightmare. The ships released smaller vessels, which began raining destruction down on the planet. Cities exploded in seconds, entire neighborhoods flattened under the precision of the Xoreth's weapons. The world's military responded immediately, launching airstrikes, missiles, and defensive measures in a desperate attempt to stop the invasion. But it was useless. The Xoreth had already mastered space travel, intergalactic warfare, and AI technology. Their ships, powered by AI systems, could adapt to any human tactic. The humans fought valiantly, but their weapons were primitive compared to what the Xoreth brought with them. Every strike from the Xoreth's ships was met with chaos below. Yet there was something strange happening in the streets. People weren't running for shelter. They weren't surrendering. Despite the destruction around them, the human spirit refused to break. In cities like New York, Tokyo, and Paris, groups of civilians, families, soldiers, and rebels gathered together, refusing to leave their homes. They had seen this kind of destruction before. Wars, famine, natural disasters. They had endured it all. Death had always been just a step away for them. So when the Xoreth arrived, they faced their invaders head-on. The aliens, who had conquered countless worlds, never expected this. The Xoreth's command center, located aboard one of their massive ships, received the reports with growing disbelief. How could these humans remain so defiant in the face of certain death? The commander, Zeril, stared at the screens in shock. His AI systems, designed to predict human responses, showed no sign of panic, no fear. The people on Earth fought back, even when their cities crumbled and their armies failed. Zeril ordered a bombardment to destroy entire metropolitan areas in a bid to force the humans to submit. But still, they refused. Every time an alien ship struck, the humans adapted. They rebuilt, reorganized, and came back stronger. The resistance was not just military. It was every human on the planet, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, ready to fight for their survival. As the days passed, the invasion escalated. The Xoreth used their advanced AI to track human movements, to calculate the best time to strike, but they couldn't predict the way humans would respond. Earth's global defense network was obliterated in the first wave of attacks. Satellites went dark, communication systems were down, and the human military struggled to keep up. Yet, human ingenuity rose to the occasion. They started hacking alien drones, using their knowledge of Earth's technology to fight back. Humans, with their limited resources, managed to infiltrate alien systems, hijacking their drones and turning their weapons against them. Despite being overwhelmed, humanity's fight was not about winning. It was about survival. The Xoreth had made a grave mistake in underestimating the human will. They were used to planets where the inhabitants cowered before their superior technology. They were accustomed to seeing fear and helplessness in their victims. But here on Earth, they saw none of that. Humans, facing the end, were filled with something different: resolve. The Xoreth commanders were baffled by what they saw. They sent wave after wave of drones, each more powerful than the last. Yet every time they arrived, humans fought back with desperation and creativity. In a desperate move, Zeril ordered the launch of an experimental weapon, a massive energy cannon that could wipe out entire continents with a single shot. The first target was New York City, the epicenter of global leadership. The energy beam tore through the city, leveling it in seconds. The Xoreth expected to see the planet surrender. Instead, they watched as survivors emerged from the rubble, determined to continue the fight. The destruction was everywhere. The air was thick with smoke, and the skies were filled with the wreckage of both human and alien technology. The streets of cities were littered with debris. Yet people kept moving, kept fighting. The Xoreth had never seen anything like this before. They had assumed that when they unleashed their weapons, humans would run, hide, or beg for mercy. But instead, humans showed resilience. They showed something even more powerful than the technology the Xoreth wielded. They showed heart. Zeril, the alien commander, began to realize that this war was not going to be won by sheer force. The humans were unpredictable, their actions illogical, driven by something more powerful than fear, an unshakable belief in their right to live. The more the Xoreth tried to suppress the humans, the more they fought back. And with each failed attack, the Xoreth's confidence cracked just a little bit more. In the streets, groups of humans banded together, using whatever resources they could find. Some fought with crude weapons, baseball bats, knives, homemade explosives, while others managed to steal alien tech and use it against them. It wasn't the most organized or efficient form of defense, but it was relentless. The humans did not care about the odds. They cared about their survival, and nothing could stop them from fighting. The Xoreth were not prepared for this. They had underestimated the humans. They had assumed that, when faced with certain destruction, they would collapse. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that would never give up. In their arrogance, they had failed to account for the power of the human spirit, and that was a mistake they would soon regret. As the days wore on, the situation grew even more desperate. The Xoreth Empire had thrown everything they had at Earth, from orbital bombardments to eye-controlled drones, but the humans were not yielding. Even as entire cities crumbled and the sky above filled with the glowing remnants of destroyed alien ships, the human spirit remained unbroken. In every corner of the world, people came together, forming small pockets of resistance. These were not the highly trained soldiers Earth had once relied on. No, these were ordinary civilians, teachers, farmers, children, and the elderly, all standing side by side, armed with whatever they could find. There were no advanced weapons, no sophisticated battle strategies, just the raw, unrelenting will to survive. It was the kind of resistance no one expected, not even the Xoreth. The Xoreth, despite their technological superiority, could not understand how humans could continue to fight back in such a manner. They had used their most advanced weapons to try and wipe Earth off the map, expecting the humans to submit in fear. But what the Xoreth encountered was something they had never seen before: resilience. A small group of survivors in a decimated New York City had taken refuge in the remains of an old subway station. Among them was Captain Bonner, a former soldier who had seen the worst of humanity's wars. His clothes were torn, his face covered in dust, but his eyes burned with determination. He had lost many of his comrades, but he wasn't about to let their sacrifices go to waste. There was still a chance to fight back, to give humanity a fighting chance. In the dark, makeshift command center under the city, Bonner and his team began to formulate a plan. They knew they couldn't rely on traditional weapons. Human forces were scattered, resources were limited, and the Xoreth's drones were everywhere. But they had something the Xoreth didn't: a relentless will to survive. The humans had adapted quickly. Using whatever tech they could steal from alien drones and broken-down machinery, they started to fight back in ways the Xoreth had never predicted. Bonner's team had hijacked alien communication systems and used them to create fake signals, tricking the Xoreth into thinking their forces were much larger than they actually were. They used the element of surprise to sabotage the aliens' tech. Explosions went off across alien supply lines, taking out vital equipment. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't clean, but it was effective. The Xoreth started losing ground. In the ruins of Paris, a group of civilian fighters set up barricades in the streets. With the city completely destroyed, these ordinary people became soldiers out of sheer necessity. Armed with crude weapons, they used the wreckage around them for cover, launching surprise attacks against the alien drones. They knew they couldn't win with brute force, but they didn't need to. What they had was unpredictability. The Xoreth were used to facing organized armies, with plans and tactics they could predict. But humans didn't follow the rules. In an abandoned military base deep in the mountains, another resistance group had formed. This group had access to older military tech, remnants of past wars. They used those weapons to strike at the Xoreth's supply depots, sneaking through the night, planting explosives, and causing chaos. They operated in the shadows, always one step ahead, always thinking on their feet. Every attack was a small victory, and with each one, the humans grew bolder. Back in the heart of the Xoreth fleet, Commander Zerl was growing frustrated. His fleet, which had once seemed unstoppable, was now being torn apart piece by piece. His AI systems, which had been designed to predict every human move, were failing. The humans had become impossible to predict. The resistance had adapted, using tactics the Xoreth had never encountered before. What's worse, They were showing no signs of fear. Zeral's predictions had been wrong, and every new failure on the battlefield chipped away at his confidence. He began to realize that these humans were not just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. As the weeks passed, the scale of the resistance grew. What had started as small groups of survivors had now become a united force, fighting back with an intensity that Xoreth could not have imagined. Humans had learned to adapt to the alien threat in ways no one expected. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming their planet. One night, as Bonner and his team made their way through a ruined city, they witnessed something that shocked even them. From the ruins of a once thriving metropolis, a human battle cry rang out, a cry of defiance. It was the signal of another resistance group that had managed to break through alien lines. The humans were coming together. They had put aside their differences, their struggles, and united against a common enemy. Despite the overwhelming odds, they fought with a sense of unity that struck terror in the hearts of the Xoreth. They had fought humans weak, divided, incapable of standing up to their might. But now, the Xoreth saw something they hadn't anticipated. A species that would never give up, no matter the cost. The Xoreth had made a crucial mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resilience. In every city, every underground bunker, in every ruined corner of the earth, the resistance grew. People from all walks of life fought side by side, united by the belief that they could survive this. And in their hearts, they knew that their strength came from something no alien force could ever understand: their refusal to be broken. The Xoreth continued to push forward, but the humans continued to surprise them. Every setback for the aliens was met with a renewed determination from the humans. They began to turn the tide. Alien supply lines were destroyed, drones were sabotaged, and human forces were growing stronger with each passing day. The humans may not have had advanced technology, but they had something the Xoreth could never replicate: heart. And it was this heart, this unyielding spirit, that would carry them through the darkest days ahead. As the resistance continued to grow, one thing became clear: Earth was not going down without a fight. The humans were no longer just defending their planet. They were taking back what was theirs. The Xoreth had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. As the battle for Earth raged on, something powerful was happening beneath the surface of the conflict. The Xoreth Empire had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but they had underestimated humanity's greatest weapon: fearlessness. This was not a fearlessness born from foolishness or arrogance. It was the kind of fearlessness that came from deep within, from centuries of surviving the worst of what life had to offer. The humans did not fear death because they had already lived through horrors that death itself seemed like a release. In the heart of the resistance, Captain Bonner watched as his soldiers, his comrades, continued to fight. He had seen more than enough death to last a lifetime. Yet it had not broken him. It had hardened him, just as it had hardened every soldier fighting by his side. They weren't fighting for glory, they weren't fighting for wealth, and they certainly weren't fighting for recognition. They were fighting for something far more powerful: a belief that they had a right to live, to protect their homes, and to ensure that their children would never have to face the horrors of war again. One particular morning, as Bonner's team made its way through a destroyed city, they came across a small group of civilians. These were not soldiers, but families, parents and children, who had managed to survive the alien attacks. As Bonner watched them, something stirred deep within him. These people had lost everything. Their homes were gone, their cities were in ruins, and yet they were still standing tall. Their eyes showed no fear, only a quiet, unwavering determination to keep moving forward. A young mother, clutching her daughter's hand, looked up at Bonner and said, "We won't stop fighting. We will never stop." It was a simple statement, but it struck Bonner to his core. In that moment, he realized that this wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the very soul of humanity. The fearlessness these people displayed was contagious. It wasn't about how many ships the Xoreth had or how many drones they sent. It was about the unwavering resolve to never back down. Even as the bombs continued to fall and the alien forces advanced, the humans did not falter. It was as though they had made a silent pact with themselves. No matter the cost, they would fight until their last breath. They had faced unimaginable hardships, wars, famines, natural disasters, and had come out the other side stronger every time. Death had no hold on them. They had seen too much, lived through too much, to be afraid of it. On the front lines, soldiers fought side by side with civilians. They did not care who was trained or who was not. When an alien ship landed, they rushed forward together, using whatever weapons they could find. The Xoreth watched in disbelief as these humans, who had been deemed weak and primitive, threw themselves into battle with an intensity that shook even their highly advanced AI systems. The aliens had seen countless planets fall before their might, but they had never seen anything like this. One of Bonner's closest friends, Sergeant Miller, was struck by an alien blast during an assault on a supply base. The explosion tore through his armor, sending him to the ground. Bonner rushed to his side, but as he knelt beside his friend, Miller's eyes were calm, almost peaceful. His injuries were fatal, but instead of fear, there was a quiet acceptance in his gaze. "You're going to make it, Miller," Bonner whispered, his voice trembling. But Miller smiled faintly, shaking his head. "We've already won," he said, his voice weak but steady. "The fear's gone, Bonner. That's all we needed." And just like that, Miller closed his eyes, a final smile on his lips. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It wasn't a smile of surrender. It was a smile of triumph. Miller knew that in that moment, his death would not be in vain. The humans weren't afraid anymore. They had transcended fear, and in doing so, they had unlocked a power that Xoreth could never understand. Bonner felt the weight of his friend's words, but he also felt something else. A deep, burning rage. The Xoreth had come to Earth thinking they could wipe out a species. They had come with their advanced weapons, their fleets, their eye-controlled drones. But they had never accounted for the strength of the human heart. The Xoreth could destroy cities, they could crush armies, but they could never crush the human spirit. As the days passed, more and more of the resistance fighters began to fall. The war was taking its toll, but the human spirit refused to break. For every life lost, 100 more would rise to take their place. They weren't fighting for themselves. They were fighting for everyone who had fallen, everyone who couldn't fight anymore. They were fighting for the future. And with each passing day, the Xoreth grew more confused. They sent waves of drones, launched powerful energy blasts, and bombarded human strongholds with weapons that could level entire cities. But nothing they did seemed to stop the humans. The fearlessness of the human race was like an unstoppable force, a tide that surged forward no matter the obstacles in its way. It was the Xoreth who began to fear now. They had made a grave mistake in thinking that technology, AI, and weapons were all that was needed to conquer a planet. They had failed to account for the one thing that humans had in abundance, the strength to fight back, no matter what. The aliens had underestimated the sheer power of fearlessness, and it was that very fearlessness that would be their undoing. Bonner knew that the fight wasn't over yet. The Xoreth were still powerful, and the war was far from won. But with every battle, with every life lost, and every victory earned, humanity proved something undeniable. As long as they refused to fear death, they would never be truly defeated. In the end, it was that power, humanity's unyielding, fearless spirit, that would lead them to victory. They had come from nothing, fought against everything, and survived because they knew that fear could not control them. And now, they would make the Xoreth understand that the humans would never be their slaves. They would never be their victims. As the war continued, it became clear Earth was not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to show the galaxy that no matter how powerful an enemy may seem, no matter how overwhelming the odds, the human race would never bow to fear. The war had been going on for what felt like an eternity. The Xoreth Empire, once so confident in their technological superiority, now found themselves cornered. Earth, the planet they had once thought of as insignificant, had become a battlefield where their advanced weapons and AI systems had been consistently outwitted and destroyed by the very humans they had underestimated. The resistance had grown stronger, more unified, and the Xoreth knew that their time was running out. It all came down to this, the final showdown. The Xoreth had launched their last-ditch assault, sending their most powerful fleet to Earth. This was not just a military operation. It was their final effort to crush humanity once and for all. They intended to annihilate every last resistance group, wipe out the planet's remaining defenses, and show the galaxy that Earth was nothing more than a failed experiment. They were going to finish what they had started. But what the Xoreth didn't realize was that the humans weren't afraid anymore. They had faced overwhelming odds before, but now they had become something more than just survivors. They had become fighters, warriors with the fire of defiance burning in their hearts. The battle that was about to unfold would not only determine the fate of Earth, but it would show the galaxy the true power of humanity. Bonner stood in the command center of the Resistance's final stronghold. The underground bunker had once been a place of fear, a place to hide. Now it was a place of hope, a symbol of humanity's resilience. The walls buzzed with activity as resistance fighters and civilians worked side by side, preparing for the final assault. Weapons were checked, plans were made, and the determination in the air was palpable. They were ready. They would not back down. The first wave of Xoreth ships entered Earth's atmosphere, their sleek, menacing forms cutting through the clouds. It was a sight to behold, the alien ships lined up in perfect formation, ready to bombard the planet into submission. But the humans had been preparing for this moment for months. They had developed their own weapons, their own tactics, and they had learned how to fight against the Xoreth's overwhelming might. As the Xoreth ships descended, Bonner's voice rang out across the command center. Deploy the defenses. The ground shook as massive cannons erupted from the Earth, firing powerful beams of energy at the incoming ships. The Xoreth retaliated, launching missiles and sending drones to take out the human defenses. The sky above erupted in chaos as explosions lit up the horizon, sending shockwaves through the air. In the streets of the decimated cities, human fighters stood ready. They had no advanced technology to rely on, only their determination and their will to survive. As the alien drones descended from the sky, the humans fought with everything they had. They used their knowledge of the terrain, their ability to think on their feet, and their courage to strike at the Xoreth's vulnerable points. Every shot they fired, every attack they made, sent a message to the invaders. We will not be conquered. Bonner led his team through the wreckage of a ruined city, the air thick with smoke and dust. He knew the Xoreth would be coming for them, but he didn't flinch. He had seen enough death to last 10 lifetimes, and yet here he was, still standing, still fighting. There was no fear left in him. All that mattered now was the fight. All that mattered was winning. The humans had one advantage the Xoreth didn't: unity. The Resistance had become more than just a group of scattered survivors. It had become a well-oiled machine. Fighters, technicians, engineers, civilians, they all worked together, each doing their part to ensure that the enemy would not prevail. Every street they held, every piece of ground they reclaimed, was a small victory that brought them closer to the ultimate goal. The final battle took place on the outskirts of a once bustling city. The Xoreth had gathered their forces for a decisive attack, hoping to crush the Resistance once and for all. But the humans had a plan. Bonner's team, along with other resistance groups, had laid a trap. They knew the Xoreth would send their best soldiers and most powerful weapons to this location, and they were ready. As the Xoreth forces arrived, Bonner's team sprung into action. The battle that followed was like nothing anyone had ever seen. It was chaos, fierce, brutal, and unforgiving. The sound of explosions and gunfire echoed through the streets, but the humans didn't back down. They fought with a ferocity that was unmatched, throwing everything they had at the Xoreth. The Xoreth's AI systems struggled to keep up with the humans' unpredictable tactics, their unorthodox methods of attack. In the heart of the battlefield, Bonner and his team fought side by side with their comrades. The Xoreth had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to survive, and to fight back. They had thought their technology would be enough to crush the humans, but they had been wrong. The humans fought not just with weapons, but with their hearts, their minds, and their unyielding spirit. As the battle raged on, Bonner found himself face to face with the Xoreth commander Zeral. The alien leader had been the mastermind behind the invasion, the one who had orchestrated the fall of so many worlds. But now he stood before Bonner, realizing that the tables had turned. The humans had become the unstoppable force, and the Xoreth were the ones on the defensive. "You should have never underestimated us," Bonner said, his voice steady, his eyes locked onto Zeral's. Zeral snarled, raising his weapon, but before he could strike, Bonner's team launched a final, coordinated attack. The air was filled with energy blasts, and in a moment of chaos, the Xoreth commander was struck down. With their leader gone, the Xoreth forces began to crumble. Their drones malfunctioned, their ships fell from the sky, and the remaining soldiers surrendered or fled. The humans had won. The final showdown was over. Earth had been saved. In the aftermath of the battle, the resistance stood victorious. The world was in ruins, but the human spirit had prevailed. The Xoreth had come with their advanced technology, their vast fleets, and their superior weapons, but they had not accounted for the strength of humanity. The fight had been long and hard, but in the end, the humans had won, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because they had something the Xoreth could never understand: a fierce, unbreakable will to survive. As the dust settled, Bonner looked out over the battlefield, knowing that the fight was far from over. The human race had been tested, but they had shown the universe that there was one thing no enemy could ever defeat: the power of fearlessness.